Hello everyone, this is G and I'm back with another video. Camera on today, I'm feeling like being on camera. So I wanted to briefly discuss this news about the horror game Martha is Dead being censored on PS4 and PS5, right? And the reason I want to cover it is because it sounds like a bit of hypocrisy to me if you think about it, if what's being said is true, right? Now I want to make it clear. While I'm certainly for creative expression, freedom of expression, I am not one of those absolutist anti-censorship who acts like any instance of censorship ever is bad. The truth of the matter is that whenever you're trying to sell something, right, to a broad market, which is what the entertainment industry does, whether it be with movies, music, cartoons, whatever it is, right? If you're trying to sell something to a large audience, right, you're going to be censoring it in some fashion, right? Whether you censor the language, whether you censor certain scenes, whether you censor some graphic content, you're always going to be censoring it to a certain degree. That's just the way it is, right? There are many lyrics that are never sung. There are many scenes that are never recorded, or scenes that are left on the cutting room floor because of concerns about how the general public will receive it, and just censorship, right? I did a video, I think about a year or 2 years ago, where I went over the what I would consider complex and nuanced history of censorship over the past few decades, from like the 80s, 90s to now, when it comes to video games. And the thing is that the majority of video games we have played, especially here in the West, have been censored during the localization process in some fashion. A couple of early examples is, for example, with the first Castlevania game, or Castlevania, right? The religious aspect was toned down or removed as much as they could do it. For example, the boomerang, right? That's a cross, right? It's the Christian cross, but it wasn't referred to as that, right? In the American versions at the time in the 80s, because Nintendo at the time, was concerned about offending American sensibilities when it came to religious references, right? So the cross was renamed the boomerang. The holy water was now just like a health potion and stuff like that. And even a few years later, um, in the American version of Final Fight, I think it is Final Fight, where there's a little mini game where you can bust up a car, right? It's kind of like the Street Fighter beating up the car mini game. And in the Japanese version, the guy goes, "Oh my God!" when he sees the car. Whereas in the English version, he goes, "Oh my car!" Right? And of course, if you look through the history of old school games, games like Golden Axe were censored to us in certain ways. For example, the character select screen between the Japanese version and the American version are a little bit different. The American version has blood dripping. No, the Japanese version of the select screen in Golden Axe has like blood dripping down, whereas the American version did not. I actually literally didn't know about this until I was talking to a like retro gamer type person online a few months ago, and he was the one who informed me about this, and then he showed me a video. I was like, I never knew that about Golden Axe. Right, but a lot of those games that came to us and that we love were censored in some fashion. This is the reality of doing business when you're trying to sell something to a broad audience and you need among millions of people to purchase it to make a profit. There's always going to be some sort of censorship, right? Whether it's self-censorship, whether it's censored for release, whether it's censored during localization. Censorship has been and always will be a part of any sort of entertainment medium that is for the masses. And video games have certainly become that. They have, if they weren't such a thing, or weren't as much of a thing back in the 80s where they were doing all this censorship in the localization process, then it's certainly become a mass media type thing now, right? Where you have to consider the cultural and social norms and decency norms of multiple nations, multiple countries now, much more than you did 35, 40 years ago. All this to explain that censorship is here to stay. There's always going to be some element of censorship. So, my issue with this is less the censorship and more what I view to be potential hypocrisy in Sony censoring this particular game. Let me explain. Right, so this article says that developer LKA and Wired Productions, I think one of these is an Italian company, have announced that their horror game Martha is Dead is being censored on the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 at the last minute. As a result, the game's digital release will go ahead as planned on February 24th, but its physical version has been delayed to a later date. Martha is Dead's Xbox and PC versions remain unaffected. Okay, so as we can see, this alteration is mainly just being made for PlayStation. It's not being made for the PC. It's not being made for the Xbox, right? As it says here, the digital release, I believe, is going to remain unaltered. So it's just for the physical copies, right? Or at least the digital copies, I guess, of the game sold on PlayStation will probably be censored as well, right? So it says here in its statement, Wired Productions didn't disclose what's being censored and why. The company, which seems to be taken aback by Sony's last minute demands to cut content, said it's been transparent about Martha is Dead's sensitive themes since the very beginning, and even added in game disclaimers for players before such scenes played out. Part of the statement reads, okay, so according to this article, right, the company involved, Wired Productions, has taken great pains to let everybody know that this game was going to have sensitive, objectionable content, right? So the rest of it reads, both Wired Productions and LKA have always been open and honest about Martha is Dead content, with the sensitive depictions in play consistently communicated to the media since the game was announced in 2019. This content is also flagged clearly and repeatedly within the game itself before play begins. It is with regret that we have had to modify the experience on the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 versions, with some elements no longer playable. After over 4 years of passion and hard work, developer LKA now requires extra time to make these unplanned changes. Okay, so according to them, right? So here, this is the full statement. Let me read it. It says Martha is Dead PlayStation update, right? It says Martha is Dead is a narrative adventure recommended for adult audiences only. So it's telling you right there, this is an M-rated game. With play consisting of potentially discomforting scenes and themes that may distress some players. Both Wired Productions and LKA have always been open and honest about Martha is Dead content, with the sensitive depictions in play consistently communicated to the media since the game was announced in 2019. This content is also flagged clearly and repeatedly within the game itself before play begins. It is with regret that we have had to modify the experience on the PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 versions, with some elements no longer playable. So that means that certain elements of the game uh, are not even going to be playable. So this is going to impact not just the narrative elements of the game or the more artistic elements of the game, but now the actual gameplay itself. Gameplay is going to be altered. Player experience is going to be altered depending on which version of the game you have, whether you have an Xbox version or the PC version or a PlayStation version. So already I'm like, y'all are hella hypocrites. PlayStation. All right, so it says here, after over 4 years of passion and hard work, developer LKA now requires extra time to make these unplanned changes. So they didn't see this coming. Right? Martha is Dead, as a result, will still launch digitally on both PS5 and PS4 on Thursday, February 24th, 2022. But the physical retail release will be delayed uh, to a yet to be disclosed date. Although we anticipate this to only be a small number of weeks. Okay, so it seems like the digital version will be unaltered. We'll see what happens ultimately, but it's implying here that the digital version won't be altered. So it will just be the physical versions on PlayStation 4 and 5, it seems. Our physical edition our physical edition will still contain the bonus content of a double sided poster, digital tarot cards, and Martha is Dead digital EP. We will update players with the date we ship this edition as soon as we have the information. The PC and Xbox versions of Martha is Dead are both unaffected by these developments and will launch with the full unedited gameplay as planned. We look forward to players experiencing the work of LKA on Thursday, February 24th, 2022. Okay. Right, so not only has Sony put this company into an unforeseen negative situation where now they have to alter the physical copies for the PlayStation uh, consoles, right, PS4 and 5, and now have to alter not just the narrative and artistic experience, but also now the gameplay experience, right? And as has been pointed out throughout this article, according to Wired Productions and LKA, they've been open and honest and upfront and have taken many pains to make sure people know that this is a game that's going to have very adult, disturbing content, right? So, right, the reason why I bring up that this is an act of hypocrisy on PlayStation's part, in my opinion, and first of all, I just want to applaud. I just want to applaud Wired Productions and LKA for being so upfront and honest, right? For taking such pains to make sure that both the player and people outside of it are well aware of what the game's content is going to be, so that you as a player can make an informed choice about whether or not you want to play this game, right? Depending on your sensibilities and sensitivities as regards sensitive or objectionable graphic content. I mean, this is a horror game after all. It's probably going to feature a lot of blood, violence, death, graphic stuff, right? So I want to applaud them again for being very open and honest about that. Now, here's where I mentioned that Sony are potentially being hypocrites, right? Because there's this on Twitter. It's always Twitter, right? So I'm not going to play this because I don't want to get in trouble with YouTube. But I've seen this clip play out, and this person saying what PlayStation is probably blocking. Now, to be clear, right, as the article mentioned, the company did not disclose, and I read their statement, they did not disclose which particular elements are being censored, are being altered for the PlayStation physical release. So there is no guarantee that this scene is one of those scenes, right? So this is at best an educated guess, right? So for those who don't know, since I've said I'm not gonna play it, I'm not gonna play it. I'll link to it and you can check it out there, but I'm not gonna play it. What's happening in this scene is that this woman is basically having her face peeled off, right? And this is why I say that this is hypocritical on Sony's part, because Sony has allowed plenty of M-rated games that have very disturbing or uh, objectionable content, in particular as regards the realm of violence, on their platforms, and they've been openly publishing these games for decades. The Mortal Kombat series, right? Back going back to like MK Trilogy on the PS1 days, right? Currently they've, had MK9, 10, 11, and they've allowed those to be uncensored, right? And MK11 has some flat out incredibly brutal fatalities, like the one where Cassie like literally makes like a heart, right? She does this whole heart thing, and her hands are covered in her opponent's blood, and all this other stuff. And I think MK10, when it featured Leatherface, had a similar fatality of peeling a person's face off because he is this iconic horror movie uh, character, right? But they've had Mortal Kombat. They've had numerous, shooting games, right? They've had numerous horror games like Resident Evil, the Resident Evil franchise, throughout the years. They've had Silent Hill. They've had Clock Tower way back in the day. They've had numerous games, right? Even more recent stuff like The Last of Us or The Last of Us Part Two, right? Featuring very graphic violence, especially when it comes to the Last of Us Part Two, right? There were many people who said when they played the game that the gameplay or some of the things that they had to do, right, as Ellie in particular, when it came to like murdering people or whatnot, made them feel uneasy, made them feel icky, made them feel bad, right? And of course, this is a company that has published games like, Mass Effect and just again, numerous games that are heavy on the violence and the gore and all this other stuff like Far Cry, um, the GTA series, all different types of games that can be very disturbing in their own ways. So, if you're going to allow all those games to be published on your systems, right? If you're going to allow the physical copies of those games to be published unedited, right? At least as regards to violence, like GTA has undergone some edits over the years, but that's a different story, right? But if you're going to allow those games to be published more or less unedited as regards the violence, right, the violent graphic content, then why aren't you allowing it for this game? Why are you altering elements of this game when you've allowed other games which are either just as violent or even more violent, in particular the more current Mortal Kombat entries, if you allowed those to be published and to be experienced both digitally and with physical copies in all of their bloody, disturbing glory, why are you altering this game? Why are you censoring this? If you're not going to censor Mortal Kombat 11, then why are you censoring Martha is Dead? Right? That's what bugs me. It's the hypocrisy of it all. If it's fine for NetherRealm Studios, then it's fine for Wired Productions and LKA. And to my knowledge, Sony has not given a reason as to why they are censoring this game, but are but haven't censored others, right? And I highly doubt that they're going to actually give an answer, right? Or if they do give an answer, it's usually tends to be dismissive. Right, so I don't think that we're going to get a legitimate explanation out of Sony. But I do find this to be incredibly, first of all, again, insulting and demeaning to the company because now they have to make these last minute alterations, despite going through all the trouble to be open and honest about what the game is and is going to display, right? And then again, it's the fact that again, this would be different if this was a game being marketed toward teenagers or children and you wanted to edit the violent content. That's one thing. But that's not the issue here. The issue is, right, how do I put it? This is not a game marketed toward or for kids, right? They even say in the go back here, right? It even says here in their official statement, right, that the game is recommended for adult audiences only, just like every other M-rated game out there, right? So they're telling you that the audience for this game is not kids, right? So why is it being censored? Why are you doing this, Sony? Why are you putting the screws to this company at the last minute? Is it because you're concerned about whether or not these versions of the game would be acceptable in China? Is that it? Because I've heard that the Chinese government is cracking down on their own censorship, right? not wanting to allow depictions of certain things, right? Violence or overt uh, non-heterosexuality, or men being too feminine or whatever it is, right? So is it that? Are you concerned about the Chinese government not liking the game, right? But you don't mind about Mortal Kombat or Resident Evil or all these other franchises that you've published over the years, right? So that's what gets me about this. Now, one would hope that maybe the outcry against Sony doing this might make them change course, but I doubt it will. I doubt it will. Right? Sony tends to not listen to people. But this is just another example of what Sony's doing, right? There's censorship and then there's senseless and hypocritical censorship. There's censorship that does not benefit the title, right? Or doesn't. I mean, how do I put it? The original censorship back in the day was done for localization to make sure that the game could be sold. We're not in the 80s anymore, right? The people who are interested in this game would have bought the game regardless of how it was. No one's looking, or at least very few people are looking for mom and dad's permission these days to play a violent video game. So this to me is just flat out hypocrisy. You'll publish all these other games that are violent and disturbing, but this one suddenly you're like, oh, we need the physical versions to be altered a little bit. So let's tell you right at the end, right at the end. So maybe more information will come out about this. Who knows? But at the moment, yeah. While Martha is Dead is not a game I would play because I'm not a fan of horror, I will always be in favor of creative expression, and I do not agree with senseless censorship. I am not necessarily 100% against censorship, but I am firmly against senseless censorship and hypocritical censorship. And this seems to me to be absolutely senseless and absolutely hypocritical censorship on Sony's part. But anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all on the next one. Have a good day, night, wherever you are. Bye.